Jesus was black, and and if Jesus was black, the apostles were black. There was no 12 white men to follow no brother. Unless they was a police and Jesus had a warrant,
This is 12 Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
All right. YouTube tried to silence the gangster, and guess what? The gangster kept on going. My name is 12 Gauge, and even though this isn't 12 Gauge Investigative, this is my second page, 12 Gauge Investigative, for now. Something happens on YouTube that really irritates the hell out of me. They can copyright you, strike you, do all this stuff, and even suspend your services, which that's what's been done without even really me knowing it. I can't go live on the other channel for however long. I can't post in the community tab. Can't do any of that. All I can do is just upload videos and stuff, and that's it. And thank you for that, Rondi. Aquarius, thank you for being here as well. I've sent out messages on Discord letting people know that this is where I'm going to live stream for tonight, but I don't know if you guys have other ways to get in touch with people. If you do, please let them know that we're live over here. So, as you know, people have been going crazy over these documents. And I thought I'd get on here and I'd go over these documents with you because, hell, that's what we do, right? Something new comes out and we all kind of click together and go over the stuff. You know what I mean? Okay, thank you, Aquarius. Thank you. Hey, Texas, how you doing, buddy? Texas and I had a cool laugh earlier, and even yesterday. We've been texting for a couple days. And we were talking about a creator on YouTube where they were blasting him on Facebook. And we were laughing our ass off, not because of what they were saying, but the fact that we've been saying this stuff for a while ourselves, So, just interesting that people are starting to catch on to the reality of people's lies. This first one that I want to go over. Okay, why isn't it showing it? That's weird. Why isn't it opening up the page? Did I just open? Let me stop sharing. Let me start sharing. You're all talking all shit and I can't even open the page up. There we go. Don't mind the dog, don't mind my biggest fan, Okay, well, I couldn't see it over here. It still showed the title page. So this one's going to be Order on Defendant's Motion in Limine regarding vague and undisclosed expert testimony. And we all know who the defendant is, Brian C. Koberger. Hold on, let me turn this AC off because it's kind of cold. What's cool about this page is it only has 19 subscribers. That means that there's a lot of people that don't even know this page exists, which sometimes can be a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to worry about certain people coming into your chat and trying to take over and shit like that, you know? God, I can't get this right, though. Here we go. Yeah, they go, the mighty and they fall. They're all going to fall eventually. It says, introduction, defendant moved to limit or exclude several different experts disclosed by the state on grounds that their disclosures are deficient in some regard. The state responds that it is complied with all discovery obligation and its disclosures are sufficient. It adds that several of the defendant's challenges are fodder for cross-examination, not exclusion. The oral argument on the motion was held on April 9, 2025, after which the court took the matter under advisement. The court finds no basis to exclude or limit the disclosed expert testimony at this time. But if defendant believes an expert is testifying at trial outside the scope of his or her disclosure, he may object at the time and the court will consider it. Let me get back into the swing of things. My brain is kind of a little spent. I had to write 2 huge ass papers this week in my classes, so I had to, you know, my brain's still kind of fried. I'm still trying to get over this. The standard, a trial court decision regarding discovery violations must be supported by substantial and competent evidence in the record. State versus Cook, Idaho 89, 93, 334, 280, 284. Choice of sanctions for failure to comply with discovery obligations or whether to impose a sanction at all. It's discretionary. State versus Cochran. On discretionary matters, the trial court must correctly perceive the issue as one of discretion, act within the outer boundaries of its discretion, act consistently with the legal regards and standards applicable to the specific choices available to it, and reach in its decision by exercise of reason. Lundberg versus My Fun Life. 163 Idaho 836 or 863 856 421. The analysis. I read all these earlier, so I'm just pretty much reading them again. Y'all don't be leaving because I can't handle reading them myself. I mean, that I cannot do it. I mean, I can do it on the other channel because, you know, I have quite a bit of people in there. Y'all don't be leaving me tonight. I got some issues on this. So y'all be kind and at least, you know, chill with me and don't be leaving me until, you know, it's over if you can. Are we cool? Okay. All right. Thank you. The analysis, the Rule 16b, and you've heard that in the court, required the state to provide upon written request to the defendant a written summary or report of any testimony that the state intends to introduce at trial. That qualifies as expert witnesses' testimony. The disclosure must include a summary of the witness' opinions, the facts and data for those opinions, and the witness's qualifications. When a party fails to comply with discovery, the trial court may impose sanctions, including in appropriate circumstances the exclusion of a witness. State versus Wilson. Okay, so we've heard all along the state's not giving us our discovery. The state is not giving us our discovery. You know, well, if they really weren't, after Judge Hippler took over, you know damn well there would have been some sanctions being handed out. Don't you agree? Wow, that turned me purple. That's that black light that I'm playing with right now. Don't y'all agree that there would have been some sanctions had the discovery not being turned over on time? I believe it would have. The first expert is Jenny Ayers. Jenny Ayers is a forensic scientist with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services who works in evidence collecting, and crime scene processing. She had disclosed to testify in the state's case in chief about crime scene processing generally, including collecting DNA, blood stains, latent fingerprints, hair and fibers, and shoe impressions. She will explain what DNA is, that it may be present in biological material or left on an item when handled, and that it is collected for preservation and sent elsewhere for testing. She is also going to testify to her work in this case, detailed in the Lab Report 25 and supporting field notes. That report discusses ISP's processing of the defendant's Pullman apartment in Washington State University office, which included photographing and collecting evidence. And that's what we've learned is, I've talked about it a lot. As far as when you go into a crime scene, that there is a lot of photographs, a lot of video recording, and a lot of measurements, a lot of things that are documented so that you can get the correct processing going on for later on. Yeah, there is a lot of Hitler bashing. You're right. There's a channel on right now that loves to just talk shit. But you know what? He's reading these documents too, and he doesn't have a damn clue what he's talking about. Her rebuttal testimony concerns ISP's crime scene investigation procedure generally in the areas that contain probative evidence. In addition, the lab report and field notes for the team's work are referenced by based within the disclosure. Defendant argues Ms. Ayers' case-in-chief disclosures do not provide any opinion she has about the crime scene processing or about the DNA at issue in this case. Thus, he asked the court to limit her testimony to her qualifying background and her work in Lab Report 25. As to her rebuttal disclosure, the defendant argues again that it failed to provide any opinion about the crime scene investigation procedures, and it did not clearly state what she did in processing 1122 King Road and what her opinion is regarding that work. Defendant, which is Koberger, challenges apprehend the type of expert Miss Ayers is. Much like law enforcement, Miss Ayers is a hybrid fact expert witness as opposed to a traditional expert. She will be educating the jury on crime scene investigation procedures to provide foundation for her testimony regarding the work she and her team performed in this case. And as you've seen in other motions, people have multiple duties, kind of like Detective Payne. He was investigating, but he wasn't the investigator on the spot. There was a lot of people doing a lot of investigating. So she might testify that she has seen this type of work. She looked at it and she understands it, and in her expertise, this is what's going on. But it doesn't necessarily mean that she was the one that was doing the investigating. And people like to say, well, if she didn't do it, she doesn't know what happened and blah, 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 because that's not how it works. There's a lot of different people that investigate a crime scene. They have specific job duties that they do. And they all report to one person, which is the lead investigator, and they go over all the findings. That's how it happens. That's how it happens. Hey, Leslie and Billy, I'm glad you made it over here. I'm going to change my name and the logo for a little while. That way people can see the logo at least, and they'll think it's the other channel. At least until I figure out what's going on with the suspension. Miss Ayers' rebuttal disclosures replete with explanation about why and how the crime scene investigation was carried out at 1122 King Road. Her testimony will be allowed as disclosed. So they're going to let her testify. Special Agent Nicholas Balance. And we've heard a lot about this individual. We've heard a lot. Yeah, that's what happened last night. I don't know if somebody put a strike on me because of what I said in the live about the court and stuff like that, or is somebody just hating, or they just don't want me to succeed, one or the other. Because I wasn't doing anything last night that I haven't been doing, in other lives. Last night was pretty mild. I can see why I got striked with the knife one, the short that I did with the knife, to the throat and all that. But that one last night, I shouldn't have gotten a strike for it, and I appealed it, so I'm waiting on that. FBI Special Agent Balance was primarily involved in the analysis of cell phone records and the investigation. He had disclosed to testify in the state's case in chief about his analysis of AT&T cell phone records for the defendant, Madison Mogan and Xana Kernodle, as well as his own driving testing measurement to determine the use and general location of their cell phones between June 2022 and November 2022. Accompanying his initial disclosure is the 30-page CAS report, which discusses and maps the data he reviewed and the methodology employed. Initial Exhibit S2A. His supplemental disclosure goes through each page of the CAS report to discuss its significance. That is a very popular CAS report. People have been trying to tear that apart for a long time. They took down my video and everything. So I don't know. I don't know what happened last night, but I was thinking, you know what? I'll just go on my other channel, just like JB Gunner does. He has 15 channels that he broadcasts from. Not saying that he got copyrighted like me, but, I thought, let me see if this works. And it did. Leslie, did you get notified that we were on, or did you see it in the recommendations or the live? Because it'd be nice if people saw it that I was live. Maybe they might come in here, And there is a lot of hate on YouTube right now. His supplemental disclosure goes through each page of the CAS report to discuss its significance. He will also discuss topics pertaining to how cellular technology works, particularly how cell towers operate and how cell phones connect to the towers, how cell phone usage data is reflected in call detail records, and how those records provided by AT&T for the target cell phones in this case were used to create cell phone site maps showing their general location before and after the homicide and the direction of travel. And if you remember, not long ago, I presented a live where I did put up that map and it showed the cell phone towers. You can still watch my videos. So if you go back into the lives, you can see where I am talking about the cell phone towers and stuff like that. Well, I'm glad you did that, Leslie. In challenging Agent Balance's case in chief disclosure, defendant provides the affidavit of his cell phone data expert, Cy Ray. Mr. Ray complained that he is unable to identify Agent Balance methodology, which was described in the CAS report. Mr. Ray states that the CAS report omits data and or fails to mention how certain AT&T data was utilized in his analysis, namely handoff data and drive test mapping, and why some data was ignored. He asserts this omitted data and methodology is exculpatory, and without it, he cannot fairly analyze Agent Balance's work. Well, if you watched the hearing, you heard what the judge said about Cy Ray's affidavit, which is interesting because Tommy Jude's going to have Cy Ray and his wife on his panel tonight. It seems like all these people got these high-level guests, but none of them can really talk about the case, especially this one. I wonder if he's going to show the one day he had the interview that he had early on, because I don't see them coming back on his panel. What do y'all think? You think they'd come back on his panel to talk about stuff? Defendant, however, assert the attempted clarification in the rebuttal disclosure is insignificant, arguing there is no disclosure as to why he has omitted 95% of the relevant coverage maps for his drive testing, no analysis or mapping of the handoff data, and no documentation provided of the CAS report's peer review process. However, the fact remains that the defendant has all the facts and the data that Agent Balance relied upon from him to form his opinions, which are expressed within his CAS report. So he does have this information, but he's stating that he doesn't because it was handed over in the discovery process. The data supporting Special Agent Balance's opinions is located in the files of the cell phone records provided by AT&T and the drive testing files, which were provided to the defense through discovery. Identifying disclosed information relied upon by Agent Balance by description, AV number and date disclosed. While this methodology might not be set forth with as much specificity as Mr. Ray would like, Rule 16 does not require that detailed methodology be provided. It requires merely opinions, facts and data for those opinions, and the witness qualifications, ICR 16B. To the extent defendant believes Agent Balance omitted important data or is relying on insufficient data for his opinions, this is fodder for cross-examination, not exclusion. Moreover, if an opinion is not reasonably set forth within the disclosure, it will not be allowed. So the judge is saying right there that, you know what, that's saved up for cross-examination, not for exclusion. You know, that's all he's saying right there. And here's another expert, Heather and Jared Barnhart. The Barnharts are digital specialists with Celebrite who were trained by law enforcement to analyze the defendant's cell phone and PC to determine user behavior and actions. They are disclosed to opine that the gaps in data on the two devices were abnormal. Attached to the disclosures is a report jointly authored by the Barnhart detailing their analysis and finding. Their CVs were provided as well. Hold on a second. Had to yell from that son of a bitch. Defendant argues that the disclosures indicate they will testify to habit evidence, which he complains is not explained and is not accompanied by any opinions. Defendant challenge is confusing. Nowhere do the disclosures or the report indicate the Barnharts will testify about habit evidence. Rather, the disclosures state they will testify to their findings pertaining to the defendant's activities on his PC and cell phone for a period of time before and after the homicides, and why gaps in data over that time period are abnormal. See, if you just read the documents, it tells you what you need to know about these people and what the defendant is arguing and what the truth is. They're not gonna testify to the habit evidence. They're gonna testify to their findings pertaining to the defendant's activities on his PC and cell phone for a period of time before and after the homicides, and why there were gaps in the data over that time period, which made it look abnormal. The Barnhart's opinions regarding these topics are fully set forth in their joint report. For example, they observed gaps in defendant's school PCs that may be consistent with cleaning up or using anti-forensic method to clear evidence. See, that's a perfect example of something that they might testify to being quote unquote abnormal. Yeah, I didn't want y'all to hear me yelling at the dog. Hold on a second. There, I did it again. So that's what these two experts are going to testify to. Together, the Barnhart disclosures and joint reports set forth all that is required by the ICR 16, and there is no basis to exclude or limit their testimony, so their testimony is going to be accepted. Michael Douglas. Mr. Douglas is a forensic accountant for the FBI and is disclosed to testify to financial transaction data for defendant, the 4 victims, and the other 2 roommates. His initial disclosure identifies by category and the date range the financial transaction data he intends to testify to and appends Mr. Douglas' report of specific transactions found within these individuals' financial data. His supplemental disclosure identifies more specifically the financial data associated with the defendant that he intends to discuss, and also identifies video evidence obtained showing defendants' ATM withdrawals. I remember hearing this earlier on another creator's channel. It's like anything goes on that channel for sure. I mean, it's like, man, you know what they said even before I read it? They said, well, how was he able to live without money? If he didn't use his card, how was he able to live without money? This said, the defendant's ATM withdrawals. This isn't talking about the debit card purchases. They were saying, well, how did he go to Albertsons? He would have needed money. He would have needed money to live. Defendant contends that Mr. Douglas should not be able to offer any opinion because none are expressed in his disclosure. Specifically, defendant notes that Mr. Douglas's supplemental disclosure indicates he will testify to an analysis of defendant's spending habits. Defendant takes issues with this, arguing there is no spending habit opinion disclosed. However, Mr. Douglas' disclosure made clear that he is intended as a fact witness and is only being disclosed as an expert in the event the court determines his testimony was based on specialized knowledge under IR 702. Moreover, although the supplemental disclosure appears to indicate he will offer an opinion as to the defendant's spending habits, and his testimony will be limited to factual changes in how the defendant spent money. So, let's take a look at this, all right? Let's say that, I'm going to use my spending habits as an example. If you were to look in my bank statement, there would be certain things that would show you daily routine pretty much. There would be certain places that I go almost every day or throughout the week or whatever. One of those places would be Seven Brew. Another place would be Whataburger. Another place would be a local donut shop. Another place would be H-E-B. Another place would be Walmart. Another place might be a chicken place we have here. So it determines a pattern of spending. You're able to see on a document how much somebody goes through on an average day, an average week. And you can tell, okay, well, he last bought something over here, but didn't buy anything again, supposedly, until 5 days later. What did he do in between those 5 days? Did he just, withdraw money? Did he use a credit card? Did he not buy anything? And this is something that we're saying. Well, he got a haircut. He went to the doctor. He did this. He did that. Well, I can see that. But there's multiple ways to pay for things nowadays. It's just not your debit card. I have a Cash App card with over $5,000 on it. If I don't want to use my ATM or my debit card, I'll use my Cash App card. It's loaded up with money. And it's a different sequence because you have to investigate the Cash App servers, not the banks. So there could be PayPal, there could be Venmo, there could be all these different cards that could be used, which you would not leave any kind of trail, because you'd be like, okay, well, you went to all these places and then all of a sudden you stop using your debit card, or you stop going to the ATM like you normally go every other day, twice a week, to get $100 or $50. Why aren't you withdrawing money? What happened? Why did you stop that pattern? So, they did, Rondi, they did. And they were talking about, just like I was saying, that everybody needs money. This is talking about his ATM transactions and his monetary habits, spending habits. So you're going to be able to see this analysis that this expert has on that spending habits. And you're going to be able to see, okay, well, there's a huge drop off here, because he's going to testify from the dates of, he's also going to testify on the 4 victims and the 2 other roommates. So he knows everybody's spending habits. It really doesn't say the dates of when he's going to offer that analysis. It said, moreover, although the supplemental disclosure appears to indicate you will offer an opinion as to the defendant's spending habits, and his testimony will be limited to factual changes in how the defendant spent money. So I would like to see that, this is probably the Amazon purchases. How we know he bought a gift card for the transaction, right? So why wouldn't he load it up, one of those those gift cards that you can load up at Walmart? You go and buy a Walmart card and you can put $300 on it and just use that. You can withdraw $300, put it on a gift card type thing, and use the gift card, because they are Visas and, MasterCards and all that. You can use those for transactions, and they're not linked to your bank account. For example, the disclosure notes, defendant only conducted ATM withdrawals on and after the date of the homicide. So the only day that he withdrew was on and after the date of the homicide. And ceased using his debit card after November 10, 2022. So he stopped using that debit card after November 10, 2022. So I was just thinking just now what I just said as far as those preloaded cards. If he went and got a substantial amount of money, how you only need enough money for a month, how much could he possibly need to eat on? You know what I mean? You can eat in the cafeteria fairly cheaply. I'm sure he wasn't one of those people that ate out all the time like normal people. I mean, he could have, but it didn't seem like he had much of that kind of life where he was spending a lot of money. So, I mean, if he withdrew $500, preloaded it on a gift card type thing, and just used that, then there would be no debit card activity. And that's just my opinion. He had regularly used, it says, prior to November 10th, he had regularly used his debit card. There's no indication he will attempt to opine about the reason for the spending changes, just that they occurred. Thus, there is no basis for excluding or limiting Mr. Douglas's testimony based upon disclosure concerns. Shane Cox. Mr. Cox is a litigation and regulatory manager for Amazon.com. His initial disclosure states Mr. Cox will testify to the content of documents produced by Amazon to law enforcement pertaining to the Amazon account associated with defendant. The documents include the order history between January 5th, 2022 and December 13th, 2022, and the click history and sign-in history for specific dates in that time frame. The documents are referenced by Bates number. His supplemental disclosure identifies with specialty the facts Mr. Cox will be testifying to from the identified documents. Since we're talking about Amazon, I don't know if you are frequent Amazon shoppers or if you're always logging yourself out or your computer's logging you out for some reason. If Brian was like that, there are such security freaking things put in place. There's pass keys. You have to look at your phone to be linked up as a double sense of security. So they're able to see every time he was linking up to his phone to show, yes, this is me, unless he used the Amazon on his phone and his computer and doubled back. You know what I mean? So, as with the challenge to Mr. Douglas, defendants assert that Mr. Cox should not be able to offer any opinion because none were expressed in his disclosures. Again, Mr. Cox is a fact witness that will not be offering opinions on the defendants apart from explaining what the document shows as outlined in his disclosures. There is no basis for exclusion. So the defendant wants all these people not to testify, basically, because if they testify, they're going to be talking about the factual things of the case. And if they don't testify, guess what? Those facts don't get presented in front of the jury. Darren Gilbertson, defendant, disclosed expert opinions from Brent Turvey that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically assert that there is direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspect to clean up the crime scene after the homicides, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. And there were multiple weapons used against Kaylee Gonsalves, and Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Turvey report, page 20. Through his other expert, Rachel Orr, defendant has also submitted evidence that he suffers from developmental coordination disorder, which has resulted in deficits in fine motor dexterity and visual motor function. His attorneys have argued in other motions that this deficits render it not possible for Mr. Kohberger to have acted with the speed and coordination required to commit the crimes in the time frame alleged by the state. However, this has not been disclosed in an opinion of any of the defendant's experts. In rebuttal, the state disclosed Detective Darren Gilbertson, a lead investigator for Idaho State Police in this case. The disclosure indicates he will testify that he and other investigators conducted time runs at 1122 King Road to gain an understanding of the approximate time needed to have carried out the homicides. And we have talked about that as well in other lives. A report of the time runs is etched to his disclosure. It was performed to determine if one person could carry out the homicides. His opinion will be that, depending on the suspect's pace and route, he could have carried out the crimes in approximately 2 to 4 minutes. So we've talked about that in another live where I've talked about, the police doing a walkthrough and showing you that this was applicable and probable of being done. The defendant argues Detective Gilbertson's testimony. See how this goes? The state has something, defendant has something to argue against it. And this is going to go on until the trial. Different variations. So all this stuff, people acting like this is just the trial already happening before our eyes. It's not happening before our eyes. And that's what I was trying to say last night, but somebody got the wrong impression and they left. So whatever. Defendant argued Detective Gilbertson's testimony should be excluded because the state has failed to disclose how Detective Gilbertson is an expert in the time runs. The relevance is minimal. Important data, recordings, photographs, and notes of the experiments would not disclose, and his opinion carries a risk of juror confusion and prejudice. On the prejudice issue, defendant claimed that Detective Gilbertson was already familiar with the house when he did the experiment, and additionally, the house had been vacated. Defendant also note the house had been torn down, though he is not able to conduct his own test. Oh, but you are. There's a VR, virtual reality. Whether Detective Gilbertson's opinions are relevant would depend on what Mr. Turvey and Dr. Orr opine at the trial. While Dr. Turvey did not specifically state in his report that one assailant could not have accomplished the murders in the short time frame alleged by the state, he infers as much through his opinion that there was evidence of cleanup efforts at the crime scene, which would have taken a significantly longer period of time. Further, while Dr. Orr's report does not opine as to what deficits in fine motor dexterity and visual motor function defendant suffers from to the extent she testified to the those deficits at trial, it may render Detective Gilbertson's opinions relevant to rebut any inference that the defendant cannot have single-handedly committed the crimes in less than 15 minutes. So that's basically saying that this is where they got the booms and the jaw-dropping information. Oh, that one person said that there was more assailants. There were more than one. And there was a cleanup. I knew it. No, there wasn't. If there was a cleanup, there was a cleanup of little bitty here, little bitty there. You know, it's just interesting to me to hear how much people just want to run with their impression of it, which is okay. I mean, it's their life. But if you really have a sense of understanding, which I've always said, this reads probably at a 10th grade level. So it's able to be understood. Further, given Detective Gilbertson's role as the lead detective for ISP in the investigation, he's well qualified to offer his opinion on suspected movement throughout a crime scene. In addition, there does not appear to be a disclosure violation due to the lack of underlying data. It was a simple experiment consisting of timing Detective Gilbertson moving through the house at a slower speed and a faster speed. His routes were described as well as his pauses to simulate the number of stab wounds each autopsy showed. It does not appear there are any photographs or recording of any other data not already described therein. As for the defendant's IRE-403 concerns, they are baseless, meaning that they have no base, meaning that they're out there. The state represents that there were no structural changes to the house when Detective Gilbertson performed his experiments. The fact that it was vacated or that Detective Gilbertson was familiar with the home, which would permanently allow him to conduct a faster time run, is fodder for cross-examination, not exclusion. True. The state further note that the defendant stipulated to the house being torn down after Detective Gilbertson's report was disclosed. Thus, any concern of prejudice in this regard is his own doing. Finally, defendant cites no basis for jury confusion. Consequently, Detective Gilbertson's disclosed testimony will not be excluded or limited at this time. I mean, how much clearer does it get? How much clearer does it get? Are y'all understanding what I'm reading here? Give me a little bit of feedback. What do you think about these experts and what they're allowing and what the defendant is addressing? What do y'all think? Chat, what do y'all think? ISP Forensic Lab Scientists. The state disclosed several forensic scientists from the ISP Forensic Lab to testify as experts in this case. The initial disclosure for each scientist described the subject matter the expert would discuss, including the particular evidence and testing performed. The disclosure also referenced each scientist's specific lab report by Bates number. In each disclosure, the state included the following caveat. This disclosure is provided as an aid. It does not encompass all findings, impressions, conclusions, or materials related to this expert's involvement in this case, so it's just an aid. It further does not in any way limit the scope of the expert's testimony. Further, this expert may testify about findings, impressions, and/or conclusions that he or she drew from the work of other experts who previously examined or handled the evidence in question. After defendant moved to compel more complete disclosures, the court advised the state to supplement accordingly. On March 3, 2025, the state did so largely by expounding upon the general subject matter of the expert's respective work. They did not add any new opinions. Defendant now moved to limit the scientist's testimony in the state's case in chief to their lab reports. This limitation is not necessary. If the scientists testify to something that is not disclosed in their disclosures or lab reports, the defendant can object at the trial. There is no basis to prospectively limit their testimony now. Once again, strike for the defense. They're striking out everywhere they go. Gary Dawson. Dr. Gary Dawson will disclose in rebuttal by the state to testify to the degree of impairment of the victim, particularly Madison Mogen, at the time of the homicide. His expert report attached to the disclosure opines that Madison Mogen would have been markedly intoxicated from the effects of alcohol around the time of her death. She would not have the ability to mount a meaningful response to a sudden threat to her person. He further states that while he had limited his review to Madison Mogen, the same general principles applied to the other victims. Defendant seeks to strike his testimony on grounds that is improper rebuttal. He contends that none of the experts had challenged her ability to fight back or otherwise contested her toxicology levels. The state responds that the opinion rebuts defense expert Brent Turvey's opinion that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, the state argued that evidence Ms. Mogen was unable to effectively fight back supports his position that one assailant could have completed the homicides in a short time frame. Wow. Boom. They're trying. They're trying for real. They're trying for real. They're really trying, but for everything that they bring up, the state is arguing. And this is how the trial is going to go. All these little wins for the state or for the defense, those are what you're going to hear in the trial, because that's all that you can really talk about. Rebuttal evidence is evidence which explains, repels, counteracts, or disproves evidence which had been introduced by on the behalf of the adverse party. Internal quotes and citation omitted. Mr. Turvey has opined in his report that the two assailants were involved in the homicide, partially because he believes multiple weapons were used against Kaylee. Inferred in this opinion is that one person would not have had the time or ability to use multiple weapons in the time frame alleged with faced with two victims. Sounds like a freaking YouTube conspiracy right here. If Miss Mogen was intoxicated to the point of being unable to fight back, however, it would be possible for one suspect to incapacitate her and then use multiple weapons in attacking Miss Gonsalves. Everybody has ran with that, and now we have an expert wanting to put that into the court process. Everybody has ran with that. She was so drunk she couldn't have possibly fought back. So it had to be two people. Have you ever seen drunk people fight? There's a lot of uncoordination going on there. And messed up people in general. They don't have the greatest capacity to defend themselves if they're surprised in an attack, an ambush like it was. If Miss Morgan was intoxicated to the point of being unable to fight back, however, it would be possible for one suspect to incapacitate her and then use multiple weapons in attacking Miss Gonsalves. However, whether Mr. Dawson's opinion is relevant depends on how Mr. Turvey's testimony unfolds at trial. Consequently, this disclosed rebuttal opinion will not be excluded or limited at this time. So they're going to let them talk about this. But it's going to be open to rebuttal. Lawrence Mowry, Jeffrey Tanzola, and Neil Uhrig. Detective Lawrence Mowry, Agent Jeffrey Tanzola, and Detective Neil Uhrig are forensic detectives who were involved in the investigation of this case. Detective Mowry of the Moscow Police Department had disclosed to testify in the state's case-in-chief as an expert in the field of digital forensics and his role in the investigation. Specifically, he may testify to any of the subjects identified in his reports and may identify and testify to the chain of custody, extractions, electronic data, files, and location records identified in the materials made available to the defendant. There are approximately 50 individual devices, electronic accounts, and digital data listed in the disclosures about which he will testify, and he will opine that he found no connection in the material linking defendant to the devices and data he analyzed. Okay, that's fair enough. Jeffrey Tanzola is a special agent with the FBI who extracted, processed, and archived the contents of 7 identified digital devices belonging to the defendant. His is disclosed to discuss in the state's case-in-chief the extraction, imaging, examination, processing, verification, transportation, and chain of custody of those devices. The disclosure references and appends his report of examination regarding his work in his regard. Neil Uhrig is a forensic examiner and detective sergeant for the Post Falls Police Department who extracted, processed, and archived the contents of the computers belonging to the victims and the 2 other roommates of 1122 King Road. His case-in-chief disclosure likewise state he will discuss extraction, imaging, examination, processing, verification, transportation, and the chain of custody as to those computers, including his expertise necessary to extract the data from the devices. He will opine that there was no connection found between the listed devices and the defendant. His initial disclosure references and appends his officer report regarding his work in this regard. Defendant argued that each of the 3 expert testimony must be limited to what has been disclosed, the devices, data examined, and processes used. Other than the disclosed opinion by Detective Mowry and Uhrig that no digital connection was found between defendant and the residents of 1122 King Road. Defendant argued no specific testimony regarding what the devices and data depicted should be allowed. You dumbass. I mean, they just told you there's no data or digital connection between you and the resident. But you're still arguing. That's not good enough for you. You're wanting that any of the devices and the data depicted should not be allowed. To this end, the defendant noted that the state had not identified in any disclosures the specific portions of the identified devices and data that these experts will testify to. What a dumbass. Sorry. In response, the state clarifies that if not seeking to elicit opinions from these witnesses, rather it intends to elicit testimony about their qualifications necessary to perform this extraction and analysis of the identified devices and the data. It further represents that the defendant has been provided with all the data analyzed. There is no basis to exclude or limit the detective disclosed testimony. It is clear they will be testifying to the facts of their investigation. not providing traditional expert opinions. There is no need, therefore, for the detective to identify specifically what the devices and data depict. This is factual in nature, and defendant has been provided with all the material the detective reviewed. Once again, he knows everything that was reviewed. So he either saw something that he thought that they missed, and he wanted them not to be able to talk about any of it, or he just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Rob Hill. Rob Hill is a special agent with the FBI who reviewed surveillance footage from the hours before and after the homicides occurred, depicting what law enforcement believes is suspect vehicle number 1. Agent Hill will disclose to rebuke opinions by defense expert Stephen Becker that it was not possible to ascertain from the surveillance videos whether a front license plate was missing from the vehicle. Agent Hill's rebuttal references the full summary of the video, depicting suspect vehicle number 1, which has been disclosed to the defendant as a basis for his opinion that suspect vehicle 1 did not have a front plate. He then lists the specific camera locations and timestamps. He contends how a clear view of a missing front plate. His rebuttal also states he will provide testimony about the significance of the missing front plate. We all know why that's important. Defendant contends that since Agent Hill has not offered an opinion as to any videos other than those specific clips referred, his testimony must be limited to those identified clips. However, Agent Hill's disclosed opinion is not restricted to the identified clips. It expressively based on the full summary of video of suspect vehicle number 1, with the identified clip being the most clear. Thus, the court will not limit his testimony in this regard. Strike out. The order, based on the foregoing, defendant's motion in limine, vague and undisclosed expert testimony, is denied. So he struck out with that one. I'm probably going to do the rest of these on Sunday because there's quite a bit. I just mostly wanted to get on here and see if I could get on. If y'all could spread the word, I'm going to change up the channel, put the logo on there and everything else. And that way people will see the second channel. So is there any names that I could put on the second channel that, I mean, it's 12 gauge, obviously, but what can I call it that would be different? 12 gauge instead of investigative, what can I put? All you got to do is just copy the link and post it on the community tab and then write a little thing that says, this is 12 gauge second channel. He is currently having problems with the first one. Please, if you're any of his subs, please go over and check out his channel and then post it. And that's all you have to do, just like an email, kind of. I appreciate you doing that wholeheartedly for sure. But do y'all have any suggestions? 12 gauge what? What could this second channel be called? The Gauge Report? I mean, it needs to be something different, but kind of like the same as the investigative channel, because I'm not giving 12 gauge modified choke. I'm not giving up that other channel. I'm not deleting that channel. I mean, hopefully they won't take it away. I didn't get any references to that, but, you know. Any other names that I could call that other channel? Or this channel? 12 gauge. Man, 12 gauge investigative just sounds so freaking, you know, because I've had it so long. I can't even remember what I called it. I can't call it the World of Wonder. That was for something else that I was going to do. 12 gauge report. That's kind of cool. But that would mean that I just use it for reading reports. I still want to use it for investigative purposes, but I need a different 12. Like, JB had the gun report. He has Crime Time. He has, Crime Time with JB Gunner. He has some cool names for his shows. I mean, I'm not trying to copy anything JB got going on over there. He got it going on. He's been doing it for 19 years, as he always says. So I'm just trying to, get the second channel so that people can find me. Yeah. True crime. So 12 gauge true crime. Twelve gauge true crime. 12 gauge true crime. Twelve gauge exculpatory. But then people would be thinking that I was swinging the other way. It could be inculpatory, though. I like your name for your channel. 12 gauge true crime experience. How's that sound? 12 gauge true crime experience. 12 gauge true crime. Twelve gauge true crime experience. Okay, let's go with that. Well, Sunday, be looking out. Be sure you set your notifications for this channel and get the word out to as many people as you know that are subs on that other channel, and let them know to come over here on Sunday. And I will be working on updating this channel so that it kind of echoes the true crime channel, even though it has other stuff on it. So what did I say? 12 gauge true crime experience. 12 gauge 00 buck. 12 gauge true crime buckshots. 12 gauge cannon. Anyways, I really appreciate you guys. Please be looking out in Discord and send some people messages on Discord as well about this channel. I sent Nina a text, but she's MIA. I don't know what happened, if she's okay. She always worries me when she goes MIA like this. See, like I text her and the message was not delivered. Whatever message that was. Yeah, message not delivered. So let's hope Nina's okay. So y'all spread the word. Y'all be safe. I'm going to go hang out this weekend and kind of relax because last weekend I didn't get to do anything because of this eyeball thing. But for the most part, I'm feeling all right. I'll ask him if he can do that as well. I'm going to get to doing some cleaning and stuff, and I hope that y'all have a wonderful evening. Stay to the facts and leave them other people alone. Maestro, cue that music. Let's bounce.